happening, everyone? Happy, Jesus. Got some audio interference. My bad. Happy, what day is it? Wednesday. Yes. Sorry for the delay. Great green room conversation. It doesn't have to happen. Sometimes you just talk in the green room for a while, and it's fun. We have a good conversation, especially with WaLLrus. He's a killer in the mind, killer on the business playing field in a lot of ways. Very interesting guy. Great to talk to, and really get a pulse of what's going on around the community as well in the conversation. So we got some stuff to cover. You can see the Hex background. We're going to get into a Hex Sucks video made by our friend Jerry something or another. And me and WaLLrus both went through some points and just want to kind of talk about that entertainment and also maybe infotainment, valuetainment as well. And then Promethium, that's something that WaLLrus has some notes on as well. Of course, talk about PulseChain, talk about Richard's tweets. He tweeted the last 12, 14, 16 hours, which was always fun the last few days. And we're going to look at the bridge a little bit more too. So it should be fun. I'm going to tweet the link out, but let me get WaLLrus in here first. Share the link. It's going to be a good one. We'll try to make up for it with the quality content. I think we got a lot of good topics today. So everyone, without further ado, I'm Max. Welcome to the show. WaLLrus, how's it going?
What's going on, brother? Always happy to be back on here again. What's going on, chat?
You're back, man. This is your fourth, I want to say fourth appearance or so. Something
like that. We've had some cool stuff. Yeah, I've been on here a handful of times.
Yeah. Red Squirrel checking in, just saying hi to the chat. Chat's been waiting. There being a little 3 years later, a little joke on the 3 years later.
Man,
let's see what is it? Yeah, this one Hex Clips was definitely filling it the last few minutes, and yeah, Jay, everything what's happened, man. So we're gonna make it worth it. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. Don't worry.
That's good.
I saw you've been traveling. We've been messaging too. I was like, oh, have fun in Europe or something. Like, oh, it's actually in the Middle East. Like, oh, it's all the same. You were somewhere else in the world that yep. I was not informed of. So yeah, how's things been going? Are you traveling business, pleasure? Did you get a break from everything? You kind of doing some deals? What's been going on, man?
Basically all that. It's one of those things you start. As soon as you start kind of doing the crypto thing, it's funny how all that stuff starts to blend together. So yeah, I was in Cairo for most of what was this last month, June, and then I spent about a week in UAE. So yeah, it was really interesting. So there was a wedding that was in there. There was a few different people I wanted to reach out to. I did speak to like the DMCC, a few really interesting people there in Dubai. Man, I happen to love the Middle East in general. So I absolutely loved Cairo, especially like New Cairo has more of like a Western feel. It's starting to get more and more like modern. So man, Cairo is an absolute just controlled, chaotic mess of some of the coolest people in the world and the best food. So that was a lot of fun. And then, yeah, the picture that Abid and a few of those guys were roasting me about was really funny. That was the Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi. And then, yeah, about a week in Dubai, met up with a few different people I hadn't got a chance to speak to in person. Again, talk to the DMCC. It is an entirely different world talking with the kind of established powers there, some of the regulatory bodies. They actually want to help. You're not just trying to duck and avoid and not get yelled at and be the squeaky wheel. Listen to them speak around between just, hey, how can we get you incorporated? How can we get things registered? How can we, get you licensing, bank accounts, visas? Like they're very, very proactive in a lot of these free zones and actually helping companies. They're not as friendly to crypto in some ways as they make it out to be on the outside. But as far as how friendly they are toward just entrepreneurship, bringing in value, people that are going to build cool stuff, they are definitely as advertised. The thing about Dubai, just quickly, we'll move on there. The highlight stuff is really cool. But again, you could go so many countries, so many cities in the world. If I was like, hey, Max, let me take you out to Austin. I can take you to 3 or 4 spots. They're going to be immaculate, really fun. We can spend a bunch of money, all that kind of stuff. The thing about Dubai is in the details, like the UAE really as a whole, just how everything works, how clean the streets are, how dialed in everything is. You can tell how new and how planned everything is. Like they're years in advance. When you look at some of their philosophy around some of the free zones, being segregated and being focused on different industries, UAE is an incredible place. It's definitely as advertised.
Yeah, I've heard. Most of the news I see about crypto and UAE and otherwise has just been like, very friendly. I guess we'll see how many startups and things and projects come out of there in the next few years. How many founders that are attracted there, and it seems like, I feel like I've seen so many articles or even met people who live there, who are from the Western world, live there for various reasons. And then I've been there before myself. Not any business related, just to hang out and be like, yeah, what's Abu Dhabi like? Let's Dubai. Got to hang out in the desert and dune buggies and all that fun stuff too. So
yeah, even a few of the Solana devs, they were in the DMCC building. So I got a chance to talk to those guys for just a minute.
Wow. Solana, as our friend Tommy calls it, soy lana. Hey, I can't argue with the success they've had, and definitely people joke they're down a lot, but they're not zero. So there's that, I guess, and they seem to be well. I mean, some of these projects are just like, I think, really well funded from Silicon Valley, from people who have money and started investing. Beyond the 2017 was like, hey, give us a bunch of money, ICOs, we're going to go do stuff. Maybe 2020 seemed like more of like, here's not institutions, but more of like professional businesses. What does it look like to spin up blockchain? What does blockchain in the cloud look like? And like actually get these, the different investment firms and stuff to buy in. And then 2023, 2024, 2025, we got ETFs on the horizon now. So I feel like we're changing it. Like every era, every cycle has this different theme to it. Is that, maybe we'll tackle that real quick before we move on to Hex, but does that seem like the BlackRock thing, all that? Is that, are we going more? Are we actually institutionals actually in this time? Are they going to rip our hearts out again? How do you feel about that?
So probably, what was that, last November? That was, I mean, there are a lot of people that were, kind of on that way before, have been kind of talking about this a lot. That was when I, looking through a few different various things, was like really like brought to my own attention how much doublespeak we saw. So Jamie Dimon is pet rocks, roasting crypto left and right. And then JP Morgan's working on 2 or 3 different overseas. One was an exchange that was kind of a private exchange. I can't remember exactly what the context was there. They're participating in a handful of different on like the backside of like even Consensus and a few of these other larger businesses. So it was very much like saying one thing, doing another. And I need to go find the little clip where I was like flooding the market to buy an industry. I made that context. So this is kind of like, again, even like the BlackRock guys, they've been so negative. And then all of a sudden now you hear that there's that clip going around where it's like, we had, 3,000 inquiries on COVID, 3,000 on this, and 600,000 on Bitcoin. It's like, okay. So between 1 and 599,999, you guys never said a word. Now you guys have an ETF filing, right? So does Valkyrie and Fidelity. Deutsche just filed for some different custodian stuff in Germany. We'll talk about Promethium here in a minute with their special purpose broker dealer's license. So it is like, I think we're seeing what's been working, right? Like they don't show their hands early, but we've talked about, again, there's just that very, very large allure of like negativity. And now there's randomly a license pop up as like these 3 massive, asset managers want to have spot ETFs. So yeah, I think this is very much, I don't think this is the move. I think the move was the end of last year. And again, they've been really planning it since before then. I think we're just now starting to see some of the details be up front.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they say, right? They don't tell you when they're buying; they tell you after they bought.
100%, 100%.
All right, let me pull up this video. This is something I came across that I did. I was telling WaLLrus too that I did a stream with Brandon on the other PulseChain sucks one that our friend Jerry Branfield, crypto reviews. He's a review guy. And I sent it to WaLLrus, and I thought, we talked about the PulseChain sucks one before, and then he did a Hex sucks. I missed this one somehow. Maybe I just didn't see it on Twitter. And then I went through and brought out some main points. And I just want to spend a few minutes just talking about of first of all, this is a guy who I think it seems like he reviews a lot of projects. He has these like very interesting ways of evaluating them. He all these red flags just pop at him immediately, again, because he's not as in the ecosystems we are, or has these nuanced views. I'll just go through, talk about just a few different ones, and then WaLLrus, I'll kind of pivot to you too to get your opinion. But nice. Just a few things on this. So the first is like he talks about people are getting tricked into buying it and thinks Hex is going to zero. That's like the first minute of the video. Okay, great. Setting the stage here. And then he's okay with CoinMarketCap putting it on 202, I guess, to like protect people, protect investors, while we know all the real crap goes on page 1 and has all the the top 20, they get all the index stuff. But you know, the other products that don't. So like that as evaluation is just, I mean, if anything, that's like kind of like confirmation bias, if anything else. He mentions confirmation bias later on as well, which is funny. He talks about the holders to market cap ratio, which I don't think I've ever even heard people doing that. I'm not sure how useful it is. Maybe I'll ask you that for a second. Like, have you heard of people doing that? Is that an interesting metric to use?
So people will use all kinds of like proxy looks for like this number broken down versus holders, distribution, holders in general. Like they're always basically trying to look for, and it's the reason that we sort of still see this issue of like, we're like market cap doesn't matter. Everyone else is like, yes, it does. Where what they're really always trying to get down to in a few different ways is essentially like how much potential sell energy is there, right? So you can look at that holders ratio and it's basically like, is there giant holders? Is this inflated? And you're just basically looking for outliers, right? So the reason it doesn't work as well in crypto as it does in some traditional markets is because there's not the same level of constraints, right? So like if you did something similar with like Tesla, you get some really outlier numbers, right? Like tech companies versus say like manufacturing, like employees, revenue scales, and a few of these different proxies for like trying to look for an outlier or where something doesn't add up properly. Again, like there's almost like physics that apply to certain companies that don't make sense in other industries, and they make almost no sense in crypto. So it's not that it's dumb. It's just that like there's nothing useful really to deduce from that information, in my opinions. But I get some of the methodology. It's just unuseful information.
Yeah, I was wondering. I was like, I wonder why I haven't seen a lot of people use this before. And I've watched plenty of trading videos and stuff, especially in the early days. But yeah, that's one. Maybe it works in other markets better. So moving on. Then he went to the founders page. He went to Richard's Twitter, and this was made a couple months ago. And he's like, oh, he doesn't like that Richard Hart was right. He's always asking like, what was he right about? What was all these things he's right about? And of course, he does no research to figure out any of the stuff that Richard talked about or we've talked about or otherwise. And Richard's not always right, of course, but there's been a lot of calls that he's did well on, and a lot of stuff that hasn't happened yet that we believe will happen one way or another. Doesn't like his Twitter profile because even after he changed it to be Humble Richard, he didn't like it. He just talked about that. Oh, what is this stuff? All that. He doesn't like staking because he thinks it's just a way to lock coins up, and you're just like basically he was describing trading. I felt like the vibe was it's like you're trading staking as if you're trading. Like you're only locking the coins up because you think the price is like you're betting on the price to go up later on to sell them. Like that's the only reason to stake, which is funny. It's like I don't think I've ever seen anyone make the correlation between staking and trading the way that he made it in that video. I just thought, okay. I mean, of course, in a bear market, this looks more. This looks more like it's a bad idea or whatever. But again, I think that's the bear market thing too. Questions the benevolence of the SAC wallets, all the stuff holding Hex. Again, that's something that I don't think he's looked much into, or all the analysis. And Dipcatcher has actually done a lot of analysis on the SAC wallets, the OA, and all that stuff recently too, which I invite everyone to watch the previous stream where Dipcatcher was on, and we went through that. Very, very interesting.
He does great stuff.
Yeah, man, he's been killing on Twitter lately, posting all the analysis and tracking all this stuff. And then this is like one of the funniest ones. Doesn't like that you can't market sell $6 million worth of Hex, and like literally he just pulls up Uniswap and he just types in what was it, $10,000 or $6,000. Like, oh cool, we can sell $6,000, and then he types in, oh, let's add some zeros, and it's like, what? How many other coins can you do that to? Like how many? Like who is? And by the way, who's market selling $6 million worth of Hex first of all, without getting 30, 40, 50% slippage? And then of course, you add some more zeros. Oh no, now you can't. Now you get all kinds of. Now you get millions of dollars. And then he complains about the $500 Ethereum fee, which immediately I was like, PulseChain, that too. But yeah, we'll pause on that, and you can kind of talk about that too of just these expectations in the selling and market and all that stuff. What was interesting about that?
Like, so this is one of those things where like you can, if like we see it with sports, like you just see this like, oh, XYZ player went down 7 on weekdays he's 0-15. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, so like you can get into this with like anything. You can take any asset, like pick the best thing ever, and like we can just start trying to trash if we want. Like I can cherry pick some statistics and like look it over. So again, like with staking, like people are just like, oh, you're locked in, you can't sell. It's like, yeah, but you're paid to. And like most
He
people
doesn't
aren't
even
going to
mention
sell
that, I don't
anyway,
think.
right? But now there's you know, on-chain clarity about sell pressure. So like, okay, I'm removing my coins from sell pressure. I'm locked in. Like I'd have to take XYZ fiscal penalty to unlock them and sell. Okay, so now the other player now has more clarity on, you know, again, can take more confidence in a buy or wherever they want to move into, right? So this is, again, you could just do none of it, right? Like you could just start with like you could look at like Bitcoin and be like, Bitcoin does nothing. Kinda, except it's a massive market. It's fungible. It's accepted here. Again, you know, again, you can go on and on, like we kind of know. So you, again, like it starts with like this thing has all the same functionality as Bitcoin. It's like, now what does it do? And we see this, another one, I like this with player projections. Don't tell me what something can't do. Tell me what it can do, right? So can you sell 6 million in a market order? Nope. Certificate deposit. Why would you? Like you can't, you know, again, like this is the famous RH line, but you can even, you know, get it smaller. You can't sell all the paintings. You can't sell all the houses, right? Like I want a market to roughly be as illiquid as possible, right up to the point that I can't sell my bags. Like, so if you're looking like just selfishly at an asset class, I want there to be just enough liquidity that my buys and sells aren't affected, and that it's as illiquid up to that point because I want it to be really volatile and price sensitive, right? So unless I'm market selling $6 million and not in general right now, I don't want there to be enough liquidity because that holds the price down. It starts to dampen price action, right? So if you're looking at Hex as, hey, a speculative instrument that's a certificate deposit that I have this long-term price horizon in, I don't want big liquidity. I don't want this, you know, again, a lot of this irrational stuff he gets into and listings here, like this is all upside for growth. I don't need it to be, say, heavy collateral, like something we would do with like Pulse and LL. I don't need it to be used as, say, like a currency and have the amount of like fungibility as Bitcoin. That's not what I'm doing with it, right? So I don't care that it doesn't work good in this place. Like, you know, that's like saying that like a window makes a bad door. It's like, yeah, because it's a window, right? But they look at these things illogically and try to just, again, what it really comes down to is this guy, I'm imagining, is just super fun at parties and also doesn't hold Hex and wants to have confirmation bias. So again, you can get into any of these nuanced things, but what it comes down to is, what am I doing with it? What does it do well? That's really all it is.
Yeah, there's so many points, and he barely talks. I'm not even sure if he even mentions the yield. He doesn't mention any of the like the things that people like about it. He doesn't mention T-shares, obviously, all that stuff too. Very, I like the comment, Jerry Trashfield. We're having an objective, non-ad hominem conversation about it. That's we do non-ad hominem on the show. But I think talking about these points is fun just to point out where, because people see this and they think, wow, this guy does a lot of videos, or he he has all these strong points, and he has a lot of conviction in what he's saying, and it's easier for people to believe it when they see someone just talking very loudly and very confidently about something that he could have just, I have no idea how much research he did. He could have spent a day or two. He could have spent an hour or two. I don't know. But he's definitely not trying to be objective. I think that's the thing to pay attention to when you're watching reviews of any crypto or watching any person talk about it. Like, what is their interest? Like, what are they trying to do? And, of course, if you've got a title that says Hex's obvious crypto scam, Ponzi scheme, honest altcoin review, I think that's what's going on with the title, by the way. Like, you can't say one thing and then be like, you can't try to be objective and then like totally come at it subjectively.
So there's a little bit of psychology. I can't remember which cat wrote this down. If you understand the information well, then the information tells you about the speaker. If you know the speaker well, that tells you about the information, right? So here, I don't really know Jerry, but I know a lot about Hex, right? Okay, so what I know about Hex, given his take on it, tells me about Jerry to some degree. And this isn't an ad hominem. I'm not meaning to mean this directly at him. I'm talking about, to your point about motivations, incentives, who these people are, right? So if you know a lot about Hex, then this gives you a good idea about either Jerry's incentives, motives. You could say competency. Again, I'm not trying to solo him out. I'm using this as like a learning experience, right? So this isn't particularly about Jerry. And the opposite was true, is if I know a lot about Jerry, then that would give me some qualifiers about the information. So if Jerry was, I don't know, former head of the SEC, ran this, and this, and a billionaire, okay, then this would make me a lot more concerned about the information he put out, because then I would have a high degree of competency and assurity at his information. But since I don't know much about Jerry and I know a lot about Hex, this doesn't really tell me about Hex. This tells me about the speaker.
and he is heavily incentivized to make these kinds of, I mean, anyone is heavily incentivized to make these kinds of videos. 7.6K views. He's got under 2K subs. Like, these are videos that people want to see, and they want people to be outrageous or talk about things that are interesting. And honestly, those views are just confirmation of anything that people are interested in Hex more than anything else. So yeah, again, motivations. You made some great points too, but like, why is anyone making content like this? Because maybe because it gets clicks. Maybe if you got a lot of clicks saying Hex is amazing, I guarantee if anyone made a video, because I'm going to post a clip of this too that says, like, Hex sucks response, and I bet a lot of people will be interested in it. But if the same video, if he did a video saying I'm all in Hex now, or I like Hex now, or Hex is great, it would probably get half as much stuff. It's just the way that the thing works. And unfortunately, I mean, sometimes it works in our favor and sometimes it doesn't. So just a couple more points before we wrap up on it. Hard for WaLLrus to exit. I mean, that's kind of the point that he was trying to make around selling and the slippage and how you can't just keep adding zeros to something and sell it because of liquidity and all that. We talked about that. Doesn't like the Hex price success story. So that was interesting. He's like, oh, this is the thing that everyone points to. So he brought up a Hex chart. He's like, this is what everyone points to about, if you bought it here and you got here, this is the run up. This was the thing everyone did. But then he's like, but almost no one did that. Almost no one did that. And that shouldn't be anything that you should look at. He's trying to say that because you probably didn't get in it. It's like, well, investing and getting it early in anything. It's like, sure. I mean, that's, you could cherry pick and say, hey, if only it did it again, if it went from here to there again. And a lot of people in their community believe that. They have hope that Hex will rise again. A lot of people hope that, and maybe the tokenomics will help, and maybe the community will help, and maybe the markets will help, or maybe not. But just pointing that out as something that's not valid, that's where I'm like, come on, it showed this performance. It showed the strength. It showed its ability to perform. You can't just count that out, right, WaLLrus? I mean, you could take both sides, steel man and straw man.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Sides. Like, obviously, again, like he's not being fair in that critique. I do think there's a little bit of merit to that argument when done properly, right? Like, so again, to your point, like a steel man, he's straw manning that example. You can look at different. So like say with something like Bitcoin, where it's been through a lot of cycles, there's a huge amount of energy. Like, what that chart tells you has a little more information than what's on something that's a little more liquid. So again, I think he's using a very poor example, but there's more value in what he's saying to some degree on other coins, other tokens. So like, again, like that chart there. So like, you can say like it's hit its peak. It's not going to do that again. You missed all these things. There's some credence to that, again, especially in different markets. It just doesn't really make sense when you look at everything else. Yeah, that I want to give him a little more fairness on that one again, because basically what I'm saying is I disagree, but there is some logic in that example on certain things where it's so like if you see a movement in, I'm trying to think of another good example, because again, I don't do a lot of the chart stuff, but like if you look at certain moves, like they're going to say that, hey, way more people were successful here than not, right? So if you see, say, like an early spike and then it comes down, say like that first wave you see on a lot of charts, that's not really communicating what happened, right? Like that's a very, very, very few people who say sold at this huge peak. But like when something's more in the middle there, like in that middle, yeah, you can look at like how many people bought in a certain zone, how many people are still in profit. There are ways to sort of do that more intelligently, but that's really not what he's doing. I don't hate the argument every time.
No, yeah, I mean, to be fair, like that, we should have stronger arguments than it did this before, and we think it'll do it again. I totally agree with that. I would look. I mean, you talked about other cryptos too, and I just pulled up Bitcoin. We do see with Bitcoin, and it always reminds me of RH talking about this too. Of if Hex is the better Bitcoin, and if it's designed better and it's and it could follow that historically speaking, if it's like the ideal is it for it to grow and just like any other crypto too, make higher lows and stuff like that. There are historical examples of this happening with Bitcoin and a lot of other stuff too. So maybe it's because it's hard to make that because it's only happened once. Do you think if it happens again, and then we go into the next cycle, do you think it would strengthen it more if we saw it happen again? People just need to see it happen, make a higher low again, or do anything in that area?
Yeah, I mean, I think even seeing the initial peak, so it's different now that, again, that was after like years. So we're not talking about like some like early like wick, right? Like this is an actual top. Like you can look on the chart there and see like, again, how much value was both, put in and extracted at all those price levels. So now it's can it do it again? That already changed it, right? Like you went from a 0 to a 1. This has happened, right? So that does make it more likely to happen again. And as you go up, like you'll see when you're watching that first wave, everyone's like, oh, well, it's never done this. It's never done this. It's never done this. Essentially like every little kind of new high. Whereas now where it's X amount from its top, X amount from its top, X amount from its top. So the language even changes, having seen it happen one time, right? So yeah, I mean, again, once something happens, it is more likely to happen again to some degree. Again, you get really, really granular in some of these arguments, but yeah, I think that we'll see an entirely different discussion. Now, again, it's going to be different now that there's PX and EHEX. And if, again, so people are going to, again, Hex was difficult from some ways to like even measuring market cap, right? Like that was one of those issues way back with like nomics. So I think it'll be even more interesting looking at it where you're going to see these differences on the chains. Do people want to combine them to sort of compare them to projects that haven't really had that kind of I don't really like the stock split analogy, but again, a stock split to some degree. So it'll be really, really cool to see how even our community decides to like measure that throughout this next cycle as it gets closer to tops. Like is 25 cents and 25 cents, is that a new, is that can be considered a new top? So I'll be really interested to see how that plays out. I think the answer is I'm excited.
Exactly. Yeah. It's, yeah, I thought about that too. Will it be 25? Will 25 cent be the euphoria? Or will people be like, all right, combined, people think it's going to $1 or something. Will it be 50 cents on one hex? Will it be 75 and 25 cents? Like that's right. Going to be interesting to see. One more point, and we'll wrap up on this. People have hex. He also mentions people who have hex basically have confirmation bias, and they only keep with hex because they want it to keep going. I think that Air community in particular, it's a little different than most on that. And I'm not saying it's just a special little thing, but I really think people, and myself included, believe in the ideals behind Hex. They believe in a better crypto ecosystem, and a lot of people are willing to wait. They're willing to lock up for a long time because they believe in something more than trading, more than short-term gains and whole delayed gratification, the whole ethos. So I think sure there are a lot of people who are like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to keep loving Hex because I need to, because if I stop doing it, price might go down more. Yes, definitely. There's definitely some confirmation bias. I think that's not the central point, and not something I would point to as in why people are here, though. Where I would say a lot of people, a higher proportion of people are here for more reasons than that, than a lot of other ecosystems. I guess I would frame it like that. But yeah, what do you think of the confirmation bias?
Yeah, I would agree with your take on it. Like, so is there confirmation? Of course, but you would say that with literally every asset. Like, of course, there's a confirmation bias that comes with it. But again, is it outweighed, right? Is it too strong sort of in the calculus? And for all the reasons you listed, like, no, not really, right? And again, I think if you kind of come down to that, you'd almost have to like be able to point to like an irrational confirmation bias versus just saying there's confirmation bias. Like, of course there is, right? Like, oh, well, the holders are biased. Well, of course they are, right? Like it's literally every asset class, right? Like, hey, I hold the painting. Well, you're biased about the artist. Well, yeah, that's why I bought it, right? Like, of course I like it more than other things. Of course, there's going to be some degree of slant where it's like that's what I bought. I was interested in it. It spoke to me. It resonated with my values. I thought it was cool. Like you would say that about literally everything. So yeah, unless you have something you can point to say that this is like, again, outsized, or there's something really particular coming out, then no, it's hardly an argument.
Yeah. Jerry, one day if you want to buy Hex or PulseChain or anything else and join us, there's a lot of fun to be had. A lot of people are hopeful about a bright future. And if you ever want to make another video, if you change your mind, feel free. I think we've tried to go into a few different takes, and I think yeah, maybe we'll welcome you in the community one day. Hopefully we'll see. All right, Hex. We need to move on though too. We're gonna go through a couple RH tweets and then hit up. Oh shoot, yeah. Let's talk about Prometheus real quick too. I'll pull up the
Promethium.
Yeah, God, I keep saying it because the movie.
It's hard. I did the same thing. I had to keep editing it every time I was trying to look them up too.
Please correct me because I keep. We'll go to Richard in a minute. So let me just type in Promethium. It'll correct me, I'm sure. Nope, that's chemical.
You'll have to probably type in crypto. They don't really come up that well.
Future markets, yeah. So
these guys here.
Tell us what we need to know about them. Why they're interesting.
So I don't know what to tell you, which is actually why it's interesting. So all of a sudden, again, it feels like no one heard of these guys. Charles Hodgkins, he put out a tweet that was like, "Who the hell is this?" These guys, they have some tenure. They've been around for a long time. If you look at their team, it's essentially the Kaplan family and then a few of these ex-lawyers, a few people like ex-SEC staffers. And I'm just kind of getting through this. So Aaron is the kind of famous one. He's spoken here a bunch recently on Unchained. He popped up in a few of the different meetings they had in front of Congress, and just him and Gensler are the only people alive that seem to think, no, everything's fantastic. No, everything's here. We don't need new laws. So I would encourage people to go look at the podcast he had with Rodrigo from Paradigm. That one's really interesting. You can kind of see some of what I'm trying to allude to and why this one's so wild. And you could even tell in the grilling that he got from the congressional hearings where they were like, what are you talking about? I mean, even they were like, man, what are you reading? This is an absolute like reciting of like SEC talking points. So the big thing, and Gensler spoken about them a little too much. They got a special purpose broker dealer's license, which allows them to basically sell securities. And it was a little bit different around crypto. The big issue is essentially like, why these guys? So, this isn't Coinbase. It's none of these big players that have been in the space for a long, long time. These guys just get it. No problem. It's not any like one thing. It's like just the conglomeration of it. So I don't really, again, none of these by themselves that you'd really pick to. So they do have like a 20% ownership stake from a Chinese blockchain company, which by itself, again, you can kind of go through your own semantics. They did pass, for what it's worth, I can't remember what the criterion is now for like CCP companies being involved in American companies afterwards. So they passed some due diligence there. It's just, they had to go through and do a ton of filings, basically saying that the head of, I get the names wrong because again, it's Chinese, so it's very hard for me to truly remember, from their 20% ownership stake. And they're like, oh no, we're not giving any information out. They're just shareholders. Their initial C filing round they goes through Network One, which is, again, by itself, not too big an issue. It's just you start stacking up oddities along the way here. The law school that these guys, the Kaplan, I believe just the brothers, I can't remember if it's the father as well. It's now it lost its accreditation. Again, that happens. Actually, I have a family member who went to a law school that is would be considered defunct now because it was purchased by a larger law school. And they kind of had to go through like, do I want a diploma from a school I didn't go to, or do I want a diploma from a school that doesn't exist anymore? So again, by itself, I wouldn't hold their feet to the fire over that. It's not as crazy. It's just, you keep adding these things up and you're like, okay, how did these guys get this license? And then a big part of where they got grilled, and I think this is the real main thing, right? Like, this isn't about just trashing these guys. The only reason we're bringing that up is sort of like, this is where greater men have failed and you guys just came out of left field. Now you have a license. That's really the issue, right? And then this is kind of in line with like, what are we talking about here? So they have a license, but because of the way you're not allowed to list like securities and commodities in the same place, almost essentially zero crypto projects have actually been like deemed actual securities, like by the legal definition. They basically can't sell anything. These guys they're the only ones with this license. This license means they should be able to like move forward correctly in crypto, that we don't need any more regulatory clarity. They can't sell BTC and ETH. And then when you look into the D-filing for a security, there's essentially information that almost no crypto project could actually file. So it's almost one of those things like, hey, we have a license that says we can sell things but there's no way for the things you want to sell to actually be listed underneath that license. So it's very much a talking point. And for these to be the only guys that seem to agree with Gensler, it is very, very much a rabbit hole. again, I'm not a super sleuth. I've been trying to read through. They just popped up, and I remember everybody being like, literally that comment there, "Who the hell is this?" And so to come out of left field and just have so much just gray area on everything. Again, individually, none of these things are that wild. The fact that we haven't heard of you, okay. I mean, crypto's a big world. That you took some money, from China early on, trying to invest in all kinds of stuff. If you're an early startup, you want to make some money and get off the ground. Okay, great. Unaccredited school by itself, I get it. Again, I've actually seen some anecdotal evidence of in person, but when you look at when you stack all that up, and then you're like very counter to the rest of the industry, and if you just look at his disposition, it's a task. I mean, it's really interesting. I think that that second one there from CoinDesk, I think that clip there, that picture of him, I think is from that Unchained podcast. I'd really recommend people listen to that. It's this again, you start getting really deep into like securities laws. This is far over my head. But again, so you just have to go from a bit of a feel, right? At some point, and just nothing about these guys feels right. Nothing.
Is it one of those things where people think that they were, handpicked as the SEC is like, oh, this is what we want crypto to look like, or this is what this is the people who picking the winners type of thing? Is that what people are feeling?
You get a little bit of every side. You get, again, a lot of this kind of comes down to terminology. You get like controlled opposition, plant, cherry picked. So like I've kind of alluded to this before, that I think that some of this will kind of come down to like what we saw with like the marijuana industry, which is pockets of acceptance, pockets of like absolute rejection, just lambasting, and this clarity that makes it difficult. So now, like you really get into where it's so hard to speak about this clearly, right? So before Promethium, it's, hey, no one has a license, and so now it's like, well, one people have a license, why can't everybody else do it, right? Like you start to change the conversation when you're like, oh no, they're all securities, they're not securities. Well, these guys have a license, why don't you have a license? Well, Coinbase can do activities, why can't you? And you just get it to where it's so difficult it's hard for us, right? And they're like, this is a space that we love and cherish, and we know so many of these people that we can put some extra trust in, right? So, if I was like, I just never heard of these guys, who cares? I haven't heard of a lot of stuff, right? When Charles Hotchkiss, who's not only so prevalent in the space, I think most of us would say has a pretty high degree of integrity, and also spoken inside of Congress quite a bit, to be even closer to say that sector of the industry. And for him to be like, the hell is this? That's very telling. So that's, I think, the biggest issue is that it's hard to believe that this is just clean, right? I'm not saying that it's Chinese. I'm not saying that it's specifically controlled opposition, although that's probably what would be my guess. Where I'm at is it just feels like there's almost no chance this is just clean and clear. That's what I'm really trying to get to.
It'll all be clean and clear when Vitalik tweets about the partnership with Prometheus coin, and how everything's good now and Ethereum's now security. And I think we may be hearing more about them in the coming months. I would say either, oh, okay, these guys are okay, or otherwise. I think people, and that's what typically happens, right? Something comes up, no one's ever heard of them. People start digging around, and if they find something, then the news comes out. If they don't, then maybe it's just like the SEC is just like, oh, connections or whatever. We like these guys. This is what we think crypto should be. Who knows how long Gary Gensler is going to be the SEC, and if we get some awesome person to replace him and do regime change. I think everyone's excited about that, the possibility of that happening. So, man, 2023, very.
I'm telling you, I would. The guy, again, I know we're not trying to be ad hominem, so again, I mean this is a lighthearted joke that it's almost like a caricature in some ways. The guy has slicked back hair. He literally looks like the 2023 version of Gordon Gekko. Like it's very like it's almost comical when you see the guy. He's very well spoken, but like he's extremely smug. I'm talking about Aaron specifically, but he has like slicked back hair, wearing very much the power suit, very, very smug, the right kind of brash. He seems like a caricature of like he would play himself in the daytime TV movie. Like that's what kind of makes it even funnier, where you're like, okay, so nothing about this adds up, and then this is the guy you picked. Like this guy looks like a walking caricature of himself. So again, he's very intelligent. I'm sure we'll see a lot of this unwind, but it's a it's a pretty interesting rabbit hole to chase for anyone who's just kind of interested in some of the players and how some of this stuff will unfold. This is an interesting one to go do some. Again, I would definitely listen to the Unchained. They don't tell you much about Promethium specifically, but I think just feeling the exchange between him and Rodrigo will give some context about like uncomfortableness. And then I think you can go chase the rabbit hole and, start super sleuthing around.
Yeah, it looks like there's a couple Unchained episodes. If anyone's interested, feel free. Check out the Unchained podcast with the Kaplan, Mr. Kaplan, and Promethium, and decide for yourself. Very interesting, though. Wow. All right. Richard tweeted some recently. This is my favorite one. I thought those up here first. Good data was found. Adjustments made. Mission accomplished. And then let me put up a couple other ones here. This is the promoting one. It's awesome. This is promoting other. We'll read them in a second. Let me put up the one more because I want to get your opinion of how these fit together and how what do you think Richard's been working on, and is he changing? Is he testing stuff? Is he figuring out what works? Sounds like we saw the testing theories tweet a while back as well, and now we have more of maybe he's talking about promoting the copies and the farms and stuff like that. I've heard him tweet much less about coins that aren't his coins the last couple of days. What's your feel of what RH is doing, working on, thinking right now? If you could speculate.
It's different audiences, right? We talked about this like way back with like the sacrifice between like Pulse and PulseX, and you could kind of feel a difference in the two communities. Like now again, some of it was because it was later on, it had been talked about. So like there's other outside factors, but PulseX had a very like people chasing like yield stuff. Like you could tell this was like LP farmers instantly much more interested in some of those mechanics. So like you could kind of feel the difference in the demographics. And PulseX, I think that, again, not talking about the little infighting between the community, but if you look at sort of outside holders or people who came in later, their take on PulseX is different than Pulse, right? Pulse has a little different feel from like its L1 narratives. And then you get guys like K4K that are like very tokenomics driven, dollar in, dollar out, go through that stuff. And they're very PulseX. So you kind of hit these audiences. And I think we're seeing that he did the brash thing where you either some people just really revel with that or they hate it, in which case they pay more attention. You see some of the pivots to, he kind of talked about this a couple months back, like, I'm back to humble me. You saw the nothing but hex mentality. Now you're seeing bring some of these farms up. Like you just got to keep moving from audience to audience, right? And some of the did RH change? Like I hope so, right? Like the guy's done a ton of stuff over the last 3 years, and 3 years of somebody who's building things, like, yeah, they change, right? Like we all have, right? Like, are you the same guy from 3 years ago? And I would imagine that, RH has had a lot more stress. Like he launches anything else, he's going to have a haircut like me. I mean, the guy's been through stress and building things and moving around and, an unbelievable amount of criticism, and fair and unfair. Yeah, of course the guy has a different vibe, right? Of course he's going to speak a little different language. We all do. Like we grow and evolve as humans. We have different things to say. We have different perspectives. So I think many people are expecting him to be like a static character. He's not. Like he's writing his story as he goes. So yeah, he speaks differently. Yeah, he takes a different take here. Yeah, he's not swapped up and changed on you. Like the world's different. The market's different. Like now there's a layer one. Now there's a deck. So of course he's going to keep moving from swinging from branch to branch and taking a new perspective and taking different ways to get new audiences. Like this is in the game, right? So I think again, like with everything, I think there's truth to both sides, but that the extremes are way off. Guys building cool stuff, trying to keep pumping everybody's bags and trying to show where there's success. And it's hard, right? Like he's sort of a one-man band in a lot of ways, but we're seeing more and more people take up the mantle and other stuff. So I'm happy to see him evolve and talk about different stuff and bring up farms and keep finding new ways to engage audiences.
Is he in this message too, which I've just really tried to parse a little bit more. Precise targeted messages, it's easier in DMs. You think he's sliding into the DMs of founders or popular people in crypto and being like, hey, more of that than just tweeting about Aabe's copies or Unifarms or otherwise? Like, do you think he's going to? I guess, have we seen the last tweet of him talking about the P copy farms? Do you think that's the adjustment made if you were trying to read through these tweets?
If I was, I was gonna say, if I was looking at the tea leaves, I actually think that he's, what is it? So an old mentor of mine said, do you know why they call it old school? And he said, because that shit still works. Like, that was his mentality. And I think that some of that you see with RH is RH kind of has a bit of duality where he's, again, like on the building cutting edge crypto DeFi stuff, but he still talks about how much like he loves direct mail, right? Like, he was he talked about that a long time ago and was like semi-supportive of some of the like the Hex postcard, all that stuff that Eco and all those guys do, Togosh. So I think that some degree he's also like trying to express it like, hey, like, I have to swing a machete. I don't have a scalpel, right? Like, he can't tweet to 800 specific people. Like, when he sends a tweet out, it goes to 300,000 plus people, plus whoever retweets and shares, et cetera, et cetera. So
Elon, can we get a feature that's doesn't tweet to Hexskins or PulseSkins, only tweets to everyone else?
Exactly. So I think what he's really trying to allude to is one, hey, I can only basically scream with the megaphone and everybody who within a block can hear me. And the other is, I think, encouraging other people to do that targeted stuff. So reaching out to other specific communities, doing the spaces, talking to each other, keeping everybody on board. I don't want to say speaking in code, that's dramatic, but like I think he's again trying to express like, guys, like I have one megaphone here and I talk to 300,000 people. Like, I can't just say, get in here and just tell Max specifically what he should do or XYZ what he should do. Like, he's like, it's just a shotgun. It just goes where it goes, guys. So he has to, like, again, be careful on what he's doing, try to encourage adoption, bring on the chain, but he can't come pat you on the head and tuck you in at night and tell you one-on-one what you should do.
Yeah, Richard's definitely the message with the farms. Like I get it. I think that was something, and I've tweeted about it too. Even though I've seen, it's funny, like my feed is turned into like a lot of the other coins getting promoted type of stuff. Yeah, actually, I saw like a pretty fun looking Pepe dressed as Richard the other day, and I was like, should I like it? Because if I like it, I may get more Pepe stuff, but also appreciate the artwork. So I was like conflicted there on how to do it. Because as a Hex guy, as a Pulse, I don't care about a lot of other stuff. I care about stuff in the ecosystem, and I want, of course, I would prefer my founder mostly talk about that. However, when I zoom out and I'm like, okay, this guy's got 328K followers, he can reach a lot of people. He can get the message out of come get your free coins, come bridge stuff over. It's stuff that we want to happen if you want to grow the liquidity and stuff in the ecosystem. So it is tough. It's but I try not to have an emotional response to a lot of it. When I see him doing something, I'm like, my second thought was like, okay, but what is it for? I try not to think like, do I like this? If I don't like it, for example, or if I don't understand, I think, okay, what is this for? And maybe sometimes you get a good answer, sometimes you don't. But it's going to be the next few weeks. I assumed he was just going to keep talking about it, but now he literally says here, I would just focus on top of the things I founded. So I don't know what, maybe he will just go back to that. And we, there've been more farms come up and I haven't seen him tweet. I don't think I've seen him tweet about Link or Uni. So maybe that's where he kind of cut it off and was like, okay, I'm going to, still going to, still be more farms and stuff like that, but maybe I just won't directly promote them on Twitter. Maybe that's what will come out from it. I want to talk about too, we'll get into LO because there are a couple questions in here, but the bridge, and this is something that I've been paying attention to more than usual lately. And number went back up a little bit. So it was 42 million a couple of days ago and went down. I think it was 138 earlier this morning, and then it actually went up a little bit more. And this is a place I'll drop in the chat. A lot of people don't think are aware of it. I wasn't aware of it for a while. There's a link you can go to, and you can see on Etherscan all the coins that are on the bridge, and you can see the value and how much of each asset, and how much value is there, and all that stuff too. What do you think? I guess right now the topic on a lot of people's mind too, and of course on mine and a lot of people's, is how do we know? Is it let's pretend it's even worth thinking about. Let's pretend that there could be some macro wave. There could be some change in sentiment. There could be this could be the start of a bull run. Like, let's just theorizing, if there was something that's going to come at some certain point, is there a way, the bridge or otherwise, to see, like, data wise, these things coming? Is there, if we start seeing 5 million and die, come over on the bridge and it start going up over time or something, are there signs to see bearish sentiment and bullish sentiment in PulseChain by looking at the liquidity that's there? Are there things that you would see as signals?
I would say that those would be, maybe, what is it? Not primary, but secondary symbols. So I like I kind of talked about this a bit, like when my approach to TA, like I don't do TA, right? Like I'm not a chart guy, but I can do enough to basically look at some basics to basically tweak, right? So if, again, kind of example, like, okay, it looks, it looks way undersold. It's sitting right at a support level, XYZ, right? The TA looks strong. Like, I don't just, pushing all my chips because of the TA, but if I'm, say, DCAing over the next 6 weeks and I just happen to look at the TA and it looks really juicy, maybe instead of the 5% I had allocated, maybe I go 8-10%, right? So I use it as kind of, to me, it's steering. Like, it doesn't, but it's not my compass, right? So if you start to see larger orders, so like now that we got the router, now that there's 2 different places for liquidity, we've got some of the stuff the famous boys are putting together. If you start to see, okay, hang on, there's larger and larger buys, and then you come to the bridge and you're like, okay, we're starting to stack up assets. So the stuff is starting to become more unidirectional. It's confirmation for something else, right? So to me, it's, man, the sentiment feels like it's changing. We're getting a good news here and we're getting good news here, and Hong Kong's doing XYZ. Okay, let me look at the chart. Okay, the charts kind of tell me all positive. And then you go and look here at the bridge, and then you see, hey, this was at 140 million. People are moving back and forth. Now it's at 180, 200, 220. It starts to move up. To me, it's for confirmation. So I think you can see, again, if you start to see that bridge get loaded up, where you're seeing more and more value coming and not unwrapping and coming back the other direction, it can confirm other things. I wouldn't overestimate it by itself as a signal, but it can definitely confirm other positive factors.
Is there anything on this list that jumps out to you? We got a ton of stable coins, and then 38 million, 35 million, 19 million. Got a ton of wrapped ETH, a ton of Hex, of course. We kind of expected that. The wrapped BTC, like $10 million in WBTC. That is by far leading the of the copies that are available as far as liquidity on the other side of actual coins, leading it. And then Uni, I don't know what the number was before, but $1 million of Uni recently, maybe because the farms. Link, $500,000. Is there anything on here that's that you're like, whoa, you didn't expect, or is it good or bad sign?
There's some I wouldn't have guessed, but like now we kind of have like clear reasons. So like if you had asked me about rep BTC, would there have been something intuitive that maybe would have thought them in on the list? No. But then you see the farms, and there's some weird games. This is one of those things where, like, I would have pushed back because it just wouldn't sit well in my monkey brain. If you go back when RH is like, hey, like, it's the same ticker symbols, why would you trade them here when you could trade them here? Like, in my head, I still, like, you have that like rejection of the truth where I'm like, no, my ticker symbols are a real thing. They're where I put them. Like, no, this is mine, right? Like, no, that's the fake version, right? Like, even in the community, like, we say the copies, right? Like, that's such a habit, and you trade them both, right? And so, like, when you see wrap BTC, like, I have this like intuitive, like, emotional response to be like, no, the new wrap version isn't that thing. That doesn't make sense. And then you're like, ticker symbol's the ticker symbol. They move around the same way. And I think sometimes we just get down to like, some of us, again, can kind of be a little too idealistic or too like over complication, wanting there to be more magic, when it's like, it's a ticker symbol. It moves around. People want to speculate, play the game. The game's here. The game's cheaper to play. And all the characters are still here. So it makes sense. It's something that I would have, again, pushed back before seeing it. But seeing it play out so well, it's another one of those things where you got to be like, all right, well, RH was right on that one. All right, we'll put him another point up there. So that one, again, wouldn't have jumped out at me. The one I think that answers more of the question is Link. Those guys have always been kind of confrontational toward the project and kind of snotty toward RH. So maybe that's the reason. Maybe that's the rationale behind it being used and up there. So that's when I wouldn't have thought intuitively. But again, maybe that's actually the reason, right? Like those guys, that's kind of a negative community. Maybe we give them a little tip of the hat and you start to kind of dampen some of the heat you see from some of those select communities. So that's an interesting one. But those would be the two to me.
Well, if you look at so if you look at stable coins plus Hex, if we remove those and we just look at the coins that even remove the wrap ones for a moment, remove the wrap ones, even though you can say, okay, why is there $10 million for wrap BTC other than to farm it? Is there any other reason to be on there other than faster, cheaper transactions on the network with it? Okay, maybe there's utility. I feel like it's a little early for utility for a lot of this stuff, but maybe.
Agreed.
But the uni, the link, can you see this in 6 weeks, 2-3 months from now? A lot of these numbers, people coming to the farms, like, will that be, if that is RH's vision of having, millions of dollars worth of bridged over Pepe and Link and Uni and all these other Sheeb and all this stuff, do you think it's more likely in the coming weeks or months that we see this stay around the same or more people bridge more? Like, is it just a matter of him or just a matter of just putting up the farms to get people to come over? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we like to see like that, like keep evolving through, right? Like when you look at marketing, I think it's like they have to see your logo 3 times before they pay attention, or before there's like a little tier bump in there, like when they've seen repetitive symbolism or wording where they start to give it some level of trust, right? So if you say like chain link, all right. So let's say the link community, those guys there, the link Marines, I think is what their deal is. They see the farm, maybe they care about the farm. Let's say they do use the farm, cool, everything rocks, go according to plan. The ones that don't, go on about their day. Okay, well then maybe it's the Pepe thing. Like they hear about Pepe and they're like, oh, blah blah blah. And they're like, oh, that thing's on PulseChain too. They're doing that same farm thing. All right, they go on about their day. And then they hear the SHIB and they're like, okay, hold on. Like, what the hell? Like, what's going on here, right? Like, how do I move through here? So I think some of the cycling here not only hits those communities, but you're almost like these interesting ways of like trying to get in front of the same person in multiple ways, right? Like if you take someone who's like, say, heavy in link and you just keep trying to hammer, hey, come use the farm, come use the farm, come use the farm. They're just going to they'll dig their heels in, right? But if you sort of just kind of drop in the seed in a few different places, then you start to have like, there's a lot of this, again, like basic marketing and psychology that'll start to make those things be like retention, right? Or stickiness. You'll start to see more like more conversion into using the chain. So I think that like kind of cycling through the farms, you get that group that's like we talked about. There was a substantial minority that saw PulseX differently than Pulse, because they're like, no, I want to come play the farm game and do staking. So you get those guys, they just keep seeing new farms. So that audience that just likes farms regardless of tokens, they come and play. And then if you sit there and hit the people who don't necessarily like farms but are holders of these tokens, you can start to try to get that pulse chain in front of them over and over and over, and eventually they start to move in and feel more comfortable.
Do you think the key for the utility part too, because it is cheaper, maybe faster to transact, all that, trusting the bridge, the bridge, we hope it's been the most audited, secure thing, all that, we millions, $140 million almost trust the bridge. So that seems to be okay. Do you think that's the biggest part too, is just if you're confident the bridge works fine, your money's safe. And if you want to do transactions or otherwise, I mean, it is cheaper to transact on there if you have the wrap version or if you have the bridged over version of stuff. Can you see people actually eventually using it as utility? Like maybe if they used to do it with Matic instead of doing it with Matic or something else, they use PulseChain for it because there's more opportunities they can use their coins for over on our network, especially when more products start coming online.
So I think there's 2 things you can kind of like deduce from there a bit. So one is with the bridge. You need a bridge like this that they'll use refer to as like lock and mint or burn and mint, like lock and mint. So the reason you need a bridge like this, especially in the beginning, to sort of like bootstrap liquidity on the network is, okay, so if you, okay, let's say that I'm on ETH and you're on PulseChain, right? And you're like, okay, I say, all right, Max, hey, here's $1,000. I want $1,000 of Pulse, right? And I buy it from you. Okay. There's the same amount of value on PulseChain. The only difference is who owns it, right? Nothing's changed, right? Okay. But if I take $1,000 of ETH and then I move it over through the bridge, now there's an extra $1,000 worth of value on PulseChain. So you need like some like centralized exchanges or lock-in style bridges. There's a few different ways, but like you need a style of bridge like this to actually move the value over. So like if you do like cross-chain swaps, that's helpful for a user. I'll touch on this in a second, but it doesn't change the value on PulseChain. Like again, it can through like, you know, buying mechanics, like a little bit there, but essentially if you swap $1,000 in Matic for $1,000 in Pulse, it changes for the participants, but the networks are the exact same amount of value. So this is about bridging that value to actually on the chain. That's one of the differences on something like this. And then if you do something where it's a cross-chain swap or these other types of onboarding, those can be easier for a user because you don't have the exposure to that wrapped contract, essentially the bridge exposure. So as an individual user, you can use that. Again, it kind of depends on the goal. And then if you do still need to use a bridge like this, you want to use the official bridge, you lose exposure as soon as you swap into something else. So if I wrap ETH, come over, and then I buy PHEX or, you know, whatever it is you want to buy. Okay, well, now I'm not exposed to the bridge anymore. Like what happens to that collateral now doesn't affect me. So you can use the official bridge and then move into non-wrapped assets from it. And now you don't have that same exposure. But again, it's important for the network to be able to add value, move actual like economic mass there. And then the second one, you can, right? Like people do things in interesting ways. So if you get to bring that value over, then you can essentially use this almost like a layer 2. Like it's not how it technically is, but it's in a pragmatic version. It can be used like a layer 2 where it's like, here's the asset. It's more simple for me, you, and 100 people to speculate and play the Pepe game over here. And then I'm like, okay, now I actually want to not just cash out of Pepe, but I want to cash out, bring it back to ETH, and then go through whatever exchange or, you know, whatever makes sense for you. So there's sort of it's a scaling solution for it. There's again, just there's the network effect. Like there's a lot of ways that it can like pragmatic, like more of in a pragmatic way, not in a technical way, be used from different participants.
Yeah, I mean, spot on the point. That's a really good point too you made about the bridging over coins, increase networks value, where cross-chain swaps or just change of participants. Something I don't hear people talk about a lot, and it's very good nuanced point.
Let me give a quick analogy on that too, because I think that's a good point as well. So if you imagine there's a poker, this is an easy way to me. There's a poker table, right? And there's 5 players sitting here playing, right? Okay, if I go sit next to Max and I say, Max, here's $1,000, give me $1,000 worth of chips. The chips just slide over. Same amount of money is on the poker table, right? To get more money on the table, I have to use a bridge, or in this case, like the cage. So if I go over to the casino and say, hey, here's $1,000, give me $1,000 worth of chips. And now I walk over and sit next to you. Now there's $1,000 more on the table. Like that's the analogy. That I think that makes it clear. But like that's the difference in those two different like bridging mechanics. If I do a cross-chain swap, same amount of chips are on the table, right? It doesn't help the network necessarily. But using something that's like lock and mint, I brought new value onto the table.
That's a good one. Yep, very good analogy. I will be we'll wrap up on liquid loans. Just take like one question in the chat before we get into that. Let's use ties to stakes. I saw a preview at the PulseChain, or I saw a few minute clip at the PulseChain meetup in Seattle recently, and it was pretty awesome, pretty amazing. I actually get to see Richard's castle part of that. I don't know. Have you seen any of the footage like that yet?
None of the cool stuff that like the cool kids on the table got a chance to check out. I've kind of like one of those things like I always like to bring this back up because I'm hoping that it'll hit someone else who had a similar mind state. When I very first heard about this thing, I didn't really care that much because I'm like, well, like I've heard everything RH has ever said. I was here, so like again, I know a lot of participants. I was like, it might be interesting. I was like, but it didn't really like. I was like, it's cool they're doing one, but I don't really care, right? Mm-hmm. And then I saw some of the footage, the initial footage of that stuff that came out, and I was like, okay, never mind. This is absolutely cool as hell. So they quickly won me over. So I'm assuming it was another tier of that with the cool stuff that you got to see. Those guys, I think that they decided because they were still in that process and signing contracts, trying to get sold, that they were going to go ahead and include some of the PulseChain launch. So I think they were ready, and I think that they were going to do a little bit of an encore with it.
Yeah, it was at the I think it was the first time. I think it's what RG3 said. It was the first time they showed it at the tour, and then maybe they'll be showing it in Chicago and stuff too, I imagine. I was blown away. It was like a 5 or 10 minute clip, and I thought everyone had already seen it before. I thought I was like, well, I thought you've been showing it the whole time. And I asked RG3, he's like, no, it's the first time we showed it. And it literally went through, a few people talking and some of the directors talking, stuff like that. But the coolest thing was you get to see Richard streaming during the streams that you've seen him do before, but he's like in shorts, but he's got the nice jacket on and stuff. And you get to see all the lighting, all the camera equipment around him, and you get to see like parts of his cast, parts of his room, parts of the atmosphere. And they describe his house. I don't know how much of that his house we're gonna actually get to see, but they describe it as like, instead of going to a luxury store, instead of being on like the showroom, it's like you're walking into the stock room, because he just has boxes of luxury stuff everywhere, and just like maybe different rooms and stuff. I was just very surprised that we're going to get that level of access, and that was pretty cool. I did not expect that, and I think that made me even more excited to see it when it comes out. Who knows? I've been hearing soon and close forever, so I just stopped guessing. But man, that was cool. That was a treat. I'll say that. I'll be right back. You want to quickly tell your Hex story? Somebody's asking about that, WaLLrus. I'll be right back.
Yeah, so I've told it a few times. So I actually found out about like RH from some of the interesting stuff that I got into with like the Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Core. That was one of the first things in crypto that like really like got me really engaged. So seeing him speak with Roger Ver was like my first kind of exposure to that stuff, and just hearing again just a really different take. So crypto to me was like cool, but I didn't really get it. Like I was playing with it. It was essentially something between like a bank account and a video game. Never really like, even when I held Bitcoin early, like I held Bitcoin for like a few years doing like really small stuff. No idea what I was really looking at and playing with. And then even when Hex actually, like when it was started coming, so like I was listening to a lot of the cool stuff when he was talking about like CFD token, which was a computational fluid dynamics. So he was like talking about like, okay, is there ways we can basically not waste the energy and computation they're doing with proof of work? There was a few, like some really cool conversations before it finally, came Bitcoin Hex and then eventually just Hex. So what was kind of funny is I thought RH was awesome at that point and was like watching a lot of his stuff. I picked up on a lot of really interesting things that he was saying. And when it was getting close to Hex, what's so funny is because the stuff I was doing in crypto, I do this a lot. So like there's Nigel Richards. I might have his name a little off. He's like the greatest Scrabble champion ever. I could care less about Scrabble, but I like seeing his methodology and like his thought process, like a game theory guy. So I've actually watched like several of like his games and people talking about like the Scrabble World Championships, only because I'm just interested in finding something new that I can kind of relate and use as a lens for other stuff. So when I saw him speaking and going through CFD and Bitcoin Hex and Hex, I was almost watching it the way other people would watch a sport. So I actually, the earliest part of Hex was like watching from the launch and then still didn't put in money. Like I was just watching it like a game. I was like, oh, this thing is going to be awesome. So it was one of those where like I watched a hole in the whole time. And at the time I didn't really have wasn't really holding much crypto in the first place. And then eventually it was like I just got to get more involved. So finally ended up, buying and doing staking, and then was in Hex for a length of time. And then finally where the like forward facing stuff started to come in was basically with PulseChain. So watching, as it said, PulseChain. And when the PulseChain Telegram came out, like that was one of the first things I really joined. So like with the Hex, I was just kind of watching from the sidelines. Again, it was almost, even when I held it, it was like I was watching it like it was a sports team. Like I was like cheering for Richard, like it was Messi or Ronaldo, right? And it wasn't. It was PulseChain that really brought me to like, hey, I want to actually engage and do some of this cool stuff. And again, most people who, if they're here hanging out, probably know it from there. Doing admin stuff and everything from there, and then progressing, trying to do cool stuff, how to pulse, all these different, anywhere I could try to find some value, and then eventually LL. So yeah, it was watching some of his really early stuff with Roger Ver, which is still some of my favorite content he's ever done. And then watching the launch, not participating, and then being like, hey, idiot, you probably want to actually get some skin in the game. And then, so early compared to now, but not early like OG guys, like any of those guys that were in the first 100 days or anything like that. And then it was the PulseChain and that side of like a network layer one and like sort of the gravitas that RH had, had sort of impressed me with at that point was what, kind of brought me to the forefront.
Wow, I don't think I've ever heard your story either. Very interesting. I like the you're kind of everyone knows I've been following Richard since 2017, early 2017, and when you said CFD token, I was like, every time I hear a CFD token, I always remember that, like the idea that it sounded really cool back then too. I was like, okay, yeah, maybe it'll work. I mean, it's kind of like even today, even back then, I was like, okay, there's definitely a market for this, but how big is that market? That was my question with it. And then once he went to Hex, I was like, whoa, okay, now he starts talking about, however many trillion addressable market in the United States and China, like all the famous quotes from that. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. CD. All right, cool. Savings account, ability to earn yield, all that. And then, yeah, of course, the Roger Ver interview was just that onboarded so many people. I heard a lot of people's origin stories, and there's been so many that said Roger Ver or a lot of the newer people, the Link Up TV, people talk about that as well when he was on there. Like, fantastic interview as well.
So it's one of those same things where like I talk about like sports gambling. I use a lot of those analogies. I actually don't really like gambling that much. And like when I do, it's for very small amounts of money to where I'm basically just playing a competitive game. Right. And that's what there's enough, some relatively small amount of money is enough to make it where everybody's actually still trying to win. And that was kind of the thing when I looked at it. So I talk about like parlay bets and different ways to get exposure. And so that was kind of what it was when I saw RH. I was looking at it and I was like, there's this guy who's like very much counterculture to an already counterculture, who's like, no, like this is what it's going to be. This is how it's going to work. And sort of that, I almost saw it like a very like long odds parlay bet. And that was in my head. I was like, oh, this guy's a winner. So like, that's how I was kind of looking at it. Is in my head, it was like, oh, this is an interesting bet that I think is interesting. So like I was watching not only his technical stuff, but that was how I viewed it again. Is like I was watching a sports team. Again, would have made more sense to actually play some real cash on that bet. But I talk about all the time where like I have interesting bets where I like mentally take note of that odds and see like, does it play out? And that's what I'd done early on. And then again, eventually get in and actually start paying attention, and then don't really speak up or do anything in the community until PulseChain.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't interact with the community. I didn't Twitter. Although I was very passive for the first five or so years. And then I was like, Richard keeps saying you should have utility. I have some skills to offer. I can offer some stuff here, security and dev like stuff. And hey, what stream? Yeah. Hey, maybe I'll get on stream with some people. Hey, maybe I'll be a streamer and create content. And I found creating content is something that I like to do. But it's a testament to anyone out there who's still, you're just in the chat or you're just lurking or you're just hanging out. That's fine. Like, there's no obligation. We don't expect anything. However, if you do have some skills or something to offer, or you can have a cool origin story too, just like us, and just keep the tradition continuing on through whenever you're staked by, maybe in the 2030s or so. We'll see. Liquid loans, though, something I've heard you've been involved with for a little bit too. Might have called that during your origin story. Testnet is live, everyone. Testnet is live. I put it in the chat. Umberto asked, when go live? I think it'll be awesome. When go live, Dev?
Yep. So I know everyone's getting itchy, especially with the because of like the Oracle fetch. There's a couple other projects that are waiting on that as well. So again, this was always our timeline. Like we were going to be like 60 days as a minimum. So now we're at that point where again we're you got to take time. Again, you see the stuff that happened with like PulseX, like that stuff just happens, right? Like it's just new chain, things move around. So while we have a long time to have everything ready, it's not until stuff is sort of set in stone, things are launched, that you can start to do certain things, whether it's firing up infrastructure and nodes, and you see what other people are building and you're waiting on APIs and you get sort of final addresses, all this stuff. Again, it takes all that time to wrap up. So again, that's the full version. Everything's full tilt there. It's running on fetch. The first thing that we'll have actually move over to mainnet, which should be here very, very quickly, will be PulseChain Safe, which is it's a very, very simplified version of Gnosis Safe. We needed that for our multi-sig contract. So that's up. Everyone can use it. As of right now, you can't reference old safes. You can only create new ones. Some we'll play with in the future. It wasn't really needed for us. Gnosis is kind of kind of a bit of a bear, honestly, to set up some of the front end. They have some interesting things that can kind of make it kind of temperamental. So we'll probably add some functionality there. But again, it's functioning, doing what we need. Anyone that needs it is more than welcome. Again, it's open. It's on testnet as well. That'll be the first thing that is live on mainnet. The very next one will be Fetch, which is the Oracle. There's some cool stuff that, again, it's already running on testnet. We're going to put up the front end. It's an amazing product. The only downside to it really is trying to make the front end as user friendly as possible, because we want a lot of reporters, which are kind of like validators on the Oracle network. That'll be the next thing. And then right now with WaLLrus, so that's the full version. Everything's beautiful, working fantastic. You can go to like the analytics. That was something that took some time. That's why we need the archive nodes. That was something you didn't see on the previous versions. So it's finishing up in audit right now. I'm sure we'll have no issues. And so that'll be the progression. So you'll see PulseChain safe, then Fetch, and then LL. And as soon as Fetch is up, very quickly after that, you'll see a lot of other projects that are excited about Fetch. And we're very grateful and very excited for all the people that are going to be building on that as well. One, we love the community. We want to see other builders do great stuff. A lot of us are interested in using all this stuff, right? Like, for myself, yeah, I'm part of LL, but I mean, again, PulseChain's my house, right? Like some of these people I'm on a first name basis with. I want to use all their stuff too, right? So we'll be excited about using all the other projects and building with them and building together as a community. And then as far as timeline, so we're just getting close to that 60-day mark. So we're finishing it with audits. So we'll be coming out very soon. Like what was it? Soon to very soon to very, very soon. I would say we're in like the very. Yeah. We'll again, PulseChain safe will be the first thing to come over. When you see PulseChain safe, which again should be here very, very soon. When you see that, then you'll be ready on Fetch. When you see Fetch, LL is coming out very quick.
Yeah. Question 2. I mean, beautiful interface. I mean, like everything's just like feels like it's in the right place. Very good looking design. Obviously, we can appreciate that.
If you'll go to the top on a small one, if you'll click loan, the ticker symbol at the top.
Yes, click loan.
I may have to check. It may be on the mobile version there.
Yeah, it's not clickable.
Yeah, I'll double check. So you can just see the pricing there, all that nice index. You can see in the right corner the sun. There's a light and dark mode on the right corner there.
Nice.
So you have all that functionality. If you want to click analytics real quick, on the left-hand menu there. Yep. And so you can scroll down. You can actually see these really nice, pretty charts of how much is staked, how much loan is staked, number of vaults, liquidations, all that kind of neat stuff. And then at the bottom as well, we have a really nice kind of overview of the protocol, all those stats there. So again, it's very holistic. As you saw in the start here, you can see all the videos that walk you through everything, including a total overview. The socials are in the corner. So there's a lot about making this thing feel very intuitive and very, very clean. So yeah, we're really very proud of the DApp. And a quick nuance thing. So the code itself is an audit, will be locked. It's done. That stuff's not being touched. But you can always make improvements on the front end. So it's one of those things where code product stuff is done, but we'll have future upgrades that come to the front end as well, where we keep adding and making this thing even more pretty and more sharp. So sorry, and then please go ahead.
Yes. No, just a couple questions off the top of my head that I think could be interesting for people to understand. TCR, what is that, and what does the battery mean?
So the TCR is total collateral ratio, and that's the average of the collateral across the entire system. And so this will go up and down as people like liquidate and cool stuff. So when you have it above 150%, which is where it's pretty much always been, if you look at Liquidity or the other forks, everything functions as normal. When you get below 150 is when it goes in, that's what they call recovery mode. And that changes a few of the mechanics about how like USDL is minted, and makes where those the lowest vaults can be liquidated. And so that's to always help keep that extra buffer. So it's just below 150, there's extra provisions about making sure that you don't have any essentially what would be uncollateralized USDL. So you can see some of the percentages there.
Gotcha. And I'm looking between the stability pool and the staking pool. So I noticed, and this is testnet, but do you expect it to be similar? The APR to be way higher on staking USDL versus staking loan?
So again, it's testnet. I would imagine that both of those numbers are off in the direction that they're kind of intuitively looked at there. So I would imagine that staking loan is higher. Best guess, no financial advice, no forward facing stuff. Every single just caveat in the world, I would imagine it's higher. And then obviously 144% for the stability pool, I'd imagine it's lower. And part of that is because what happened, just natural testnet mechanics. So people go on, they do a couple loans, they make sure it works, cool, and then they kind of move on. So they leave those positions. Really, people get liquidated on purpose. They'll go in and do different things where they're just trying out the system. So when you get when people either don't maintain a position or they get really aggressive to go do other stuff, you can get on and look. And so that's why the stability pool is paid out high, is because no one's trying not to get liquidated. They don't care, or even doing it on purpose, so they can just get a feel for what that looks like and how their position is. And then when it comes to staking loan, because there's just not a high amount of loans being taken all the time, as people aren't opening and closing and doing different positions. So that's why you kind of see those being so kind of on the ends of the extremes. So I would imagine, again, that both those kind of move toward the mean on a mainnet.
And the rewards too. So it sounds like staking USDL, you can get loan, and staking a loan, you can get PLS or I'm just trying to go off the interface. I'm trying to remember what happened before.
The stability pool gets an extra incentive of loan early on in its phase. That's why it gets paid out there, as well as PLS. And then you can, the LP rewards is another interesting part that a lot of people will be really excited about. So when you stake loan, you get the redemption as well as the origination fees, and that's how you end up with both USDL and Pulse. And then the LP reward, this is something that's really cool. And so early on, whenever you're staking, if you provide liquidity in USDL Pulse, that pair, you will be able to then come back and stake your LP rewards, your LP tokens here, and actually get loan token. So similar to a farm, but it's actually wrapped up inside of this. And this is to help with that early phase of USDL and making sure that it's very, very valuable. So there's the LP rewards, which again, get everyone involved in the system, sort of kickstart that liquidity value, which is important for something like USDL. So there's two sides. One, you have the LP rewards, and then the first 14 days, there's no redemption. So again, we'll give a little more of these like early win phase stuff really close to launch. That way everybody's paying attention. But there's a few things that are different just right around that launch period to make sure that everything's safe and that the system essentially starts in a nice, clean way. So there's the LP reward, staking pool, and staking loan are all different ways people can interact to get extra value out of the system.
Gotcha. So there's different ways so you stake, when you're doing liquidity, you can earn loan.
Yep.
And if you're staking a loan, you can earn Pulse and USDL.
Yep.
And then if you're staking USDL, you can earn Pulse and loan.
Correct.
Okay. Just different ways to earn in the system. Okay.
Yep. And the thing about the stability pool, just quickly, I know we kind of ran a lot. We had some cool topics and we kind of got in the weeds on some fun stuff. One of the things about the stability pool, this is more just for framing for everyone. So when people, a question we get a lot is like, what's a safe ratio? Part of it depends on what you're doing with the USDL or whatever it is you go and do, right? So if you're like, hey, what ratio is safe? And it's because you're going to go buy your Lamborghini. Okay, well, that's very different than, hey, I'm trying to extract value and trying to generate yield, right? So one of the things is, think something like the stability pool can kind of be your, hey, this is my first tier of yield that is super easy to pay back. So let's say that, hey, I've got 10K sitting in the stability pool. All right, well, let's say that my collateral ratio is more like 200%, something that most people would say is very aggressive, right? Okay, well, if I was at 200%, but I spent all the USDL, okay, now I have exposure, right? I got to be careful. Okay, but if I have, say, 10,000 USDL sitting here, I'm garnering yield. And let's say that, okay, now the price moves and I'm down to 180%. Okay, all I do is unstake from USDL. Again, it's a stable coin. It doesn't go up and down. I can come in and pay that back, bump it up to like 210. And then I go back and I keep the yield and it goes down again and I can just keep moving it. So some of that ratio also depends on like how liquid the rest of the assets are. So one of the things that people can do is, basically just take a really high ratio and keep it in the stability pool. And they essentially could always pay it back, right? And then that would allow them to generate yield. So all I'm truly trying to frame for here is you can basically say, okay, I'm going to take a more aggressive ratio but I'm going to keep a chunk in the stability pool. So it's really easy to pay back, but at least I'm still getting some yield. And then I'm going to do XYZ thing on the chain. And if you're using basically saying, hey, I want to take this value, I'm keeping it on PulseChain to do stability pool and get garner yield. That's part of that equation about like, hey, how risk averse should I be on just ratio? So if you're using it like a real loan, like, hey, I'm going to go spend this and buy a house or XYZ. Okay, that's different than, hey, I'm using this for yield generation. So the stability pool to me is like the loan ratio, how much is in the stability pool, how much are you keeping in USDL versus like the next couple of assets. Like that's part of that, like being safe. What are you really using the tool for? That I think is interesting.
No, great point. I think the difference between taking loans for different stuff, I'm glad you called that out. It made me think one more thing and we'll wrap up.
Yeah.
Do you think that, there's different places right now, without a lot of projects being launched, the place to a lot of people are taking their PulseX and Pulse and stuff is doing LP, doing farms and stuff like that. Do you think, liquid loans are going to compete APR wise or otherwise with some of the stuff you can get on PulseX already with, the APRs, PulseX and Pulse and DAI and Pulse and stuff like that? Is it, do you feel like a lot of people are going to come over from the LP and the farming to liquid loans?
So directly, yes, to some degree, right? And then sort of like more like broad, like kind of answering the question and holistically. The farms are kind of the only game. So one, I think that that's been cool is that a lot of people have a much better understanding of just LP and liquidity providing just what liquidity is in general. So very cool there. I think it's a great experience for the whole community. And then I also think that when we look at, say, some of this price action, there's a lot of liquidity relative to time because that's the best game. That's the only game in town, right? So I think that we'll see one, yes, people come and put more value here versus in traditional LPing. And I think that'll happen for every project, right? So I think that not only will we see more games means like you're going to end up with a better share of the pool because there's more pools everywhere, but that we'll see, I think we'll actually some actual added volatility because right now there's a sort of an artificial amount of liquidity because that's what people are doing to get any yield they can. And I think as ourselves and all these other cool projects come out, that there'll be other stuff to do, and we'll see that thinning out of liquidity in general and all this cool stuff going around here. So I think that, obviously there'll be great utility in the yield projects, the products that we have. And also it'll start to give you some, again, that's where I was kind of getting at is like, to me, it's, you would use the protocol extract value. The stability pool would be kind of like your go-to because it doesn't have time locking because it's risk off, right? Because it's a stable coin. So to me, my kind of like thesis a bit would be, okay, collateral ratio, risk off yield, risk on yield, right? So I think that if you were looking at this saying, okay, well, I can get 200% in Pepe, whatever, right? Okay, great. Well then, but now I have to play the Pepe game, right? Whereas let's call it 100%. Okay, well, like let's say it's, I don't even want to give a number. Let's say it's substantially less in the stability pool, but I'm just getting the yield, right? So like I'm risk off. I can just count the yield and I can sort of say that, okay, I'm willing to say, all right, I've got this collateral ratio. I want to take this amount in a very, very safe thing where I know I can move it back. I'm willing to take less yield. And then I'll also have, whatever percentage in some more aggressive ideas. So I think that in some ways it'll just be competitive. And then in some, people will start to take more of a portfolio approach.
You think Richard sort of having that in his mind too, or the ability to turn some knobs or higher APR, more incentivization to keep that kind of LP within PulseX? I think there'll be some responses.
I do. And I think that's kind of healthy is, like I brought this up a little bit with some of like that 3-letter word that starts with an X. We're not supposed to bring those guys up. Teasing a little bit. So I think with like Jack and the Zen guys being so negative in the beginning, that was interesting, right? Like people listened. So I think that if you see, like the fiat guys and their decks, they do something interesting, right? Okay, does like, let's say that RH or the PulseX guys don't do anything. I just think that the friction is engaging, right? And then like the 9-inch guys and Hexy Bastard and that crazy group of people, right? They've got their little narrative. And I think that spiciness between the three I think that not only do you have the like what salvos do they actually shoot at each other to kind of keep trying to one-upsmanship, but also just the friction between, like we've seen like the PulseX, like in our own community, like that competitiveness is pretty strong. I think that it's always net positive. So I think that we will see some cool, like I said, salvos shot back and forth, trying to one up and be the best player in town, keep all the liquidity. And then I think that even if it feels negative in short term, I think even just the friction between all those guys will end up being really beneficial for the whole chain.
I think, yeah, healthy competition and ability to bring more people in and have different, maybe even portfolio approach. I feel like that's kind of a balanced way of looking at it too. Yeah, very exciting, and can't wait to see it. Like this is, people talk about just you could talk about all the macro and all the stuff that we don't like to see, and price down and all this stuff too. But the thing about 2023 to me that I'm looking forward to is the just amazing amount of projects that we've all been waiting for to launch, other than PulseChain. PulseChain's launched. Everyone, by the way, take a second to be grateful. PulseChain launched. It could have not launched. If we could be in July right now and be like, oh yeah, 2 more weeks. It could be that way, but it's not. So it's live. PulseX is live. Everything's getting, or hopefully will be more polished going forward. RH, is doing his thing too. The devs are doing their thing. But come summer, end of summer, fall, all the products that you either sacked for or just been hopeful about or curious about, a lot of them will be on mainnet. It seems to be. It seems like they're trending that way, at least. No expectations, but they seem to be trending the way of coming online. And Liquid One's one of them that a lot of people are excited to use. So very cool stuff, man. All right, everyone. I told you I don't think we disappointed today. I think a 30-minute green room conversation turned into an hour-and-a-half stream of lots of good conversation. So, yeah, WaLLrus, what are you going to take us out on? What are you looking forward to? What any final words before we wrap this one up?
Man, just that that forest and the trees kind of analogy. Like this thing's real. It's launched, so it's here. You got the coins. You're holding them, right? But like we're almost like still in this launching phase, right? Like we're just about to have the Oracle. We're about to have fiat and some of the Power City stuff, and then liquid loans and 9inch and like it just like all these guys. Like we're still going. So like to me, there's it's launched. It's in your hands. But like we're launching, like this launching process is like still going. Like 60 days feels like forever when you're staring at a chart, but like this thing is barely turned on yet, right? Like we flipped the switch and the light hasn't hit the other side of the room yet. So like, and there's so much of this, right? Like, so if you look at like, maybe you don't care enough about the Bitcoin ETFs, you care that there's positive market segment, that huge managers are moving in crypto. Maybe you don't care about Hong Kong. You care that Hong Kong is starting to feel like another hub, almost like the UAE in Asia. Like this is like we talked about some of the gaming and some of the rules that have changed over there about custodianship. They're sort of kind of a dance partner for China in some ways. Like there's always reasons for more negativity, but like we're inching closer to the halvening. To me, like there's just starting to be a lot of these waves that when they start to get on the right frequency are going to give you this huge resonance. So I think it's easy to see a lot of negativity, but if you were just looking and saying, hey, we were going to be listed on OKX, that we were going to have all these other trading partners coming, that we were going to have this much social engagement, that we'd be on the cusp of all these projects coming out, most people would be losing their mind. And so even some of the price stuff, like think about it in your head, like where you're at on those bags versus where you would have been with anything else. Like we're up higher than people think. This next year is going to be absolute insanity, both from a utility, engagement, what's being built, pride. I think that the anxiety also has made people forget, like, this shit is so much fun. Like this is something that, like, how many people, like, you've been on Ethereum? Like, were you around when it got started? Do you know all the players? Like, whether or not you like anyone individually, like here in 2 or 3 years, as this stuff, becomes more full, there'll be this full ecosystem, another cycle X, XYZ, and you'll be like, yeah, like I've heard those guys. Like, yeah, I know WaLLrus, I know Jess. Yeah, I've seen Buck. Oh, Hexy bastard. Like so many of these people have been able to reach out to in like a few years, as any of these things are more or less successful. Like just to be so close to so much being built is insanity. Like, you get to throw sticks and stones at the people actually building the stuff. Like you don't get to talk to Hayden over at Uniswap. You don't get to talk to the guys at the ETH Foundation. But like this being so accessible and so close and so grassroots, It's just awesome, man. It's so fun. Sometimes I get, I do the same thing and I think back and I'm like, man, I'm frustrated about a position that most people just never get to experience. So guys, this stuff is awesome. Like there's just so much being built. I just can't wait for the next year. I'm very, very grateful and very thankful.
Same here, man. Yeah, the closest you can get to Vitalik is memes, pretty much. But Richard will tweet you or tweet back at you sometimes. So
absolutely,
there's that too about this ecosystem. All right, everyone, go check out Liquid Loans. You saw us play with testnet just a little bit. Check out WaLLrus on Twitter. Is it WaLLrus HTP?
Nope, just WaLLrus or WaLLrus Official, I think.
WaLLrus Official, yes, at WaLLrus Official. And yeah, that's all we got for you today. Scivive and 5555. We are out.